Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for March 2021. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator. And this month we're going to be covering the topic of faux piecing. So what exactly is faux piecing? Faux piecing is when we make a quilt block with our embroidery machine, and instead of using traditional piecing of various pieces of fabric to make the quilt block pattern, we simulate that piecing pattern by using different types of stitches in a quilt block pattern to simulate the effect of piecing without actually having to piece. So everything is sewn on one common piece of background fabric, and the illusion of piecing comes from the way that we stitch it. So that's what we're going to cover in this video. If you want to follow along, you can. You can go ahead and open up your quilting software. Now what I'm going to teach you this month will work in either Total Quilter or My Decorative Quilter, so either one will be fine. I've got it open here. Now I've got my grid set up to inches, and I've got my grid set up to 1/4 inch each for the minor spacing and 2 inches for the major grid spacing. The way you set your grid is you right click on the ruler up here. So as a rule here for this video, if I want you to just left click your mouse, so that'll be a normal mouse click, I'm just going to say click. If I want you to right click, then I will actually say right click. So I'm going to right click on the ruler, and right here you can see I've got show grid checked, so I can see my grid. If I go down here to grid settings, I've got my horizontal and vertical and the spacing set to 1/4 inch, and I've got my grid major set to every 8, which is every 2 inches, because 1/4 into 8 is 2. I don't have any of these other options turned on. I don't have snap to grid, snap to guidelines, snap to anchor, snap to move, none of them turned on at all. But it really probably doesn't matter for this exercise. So we're not going to be really using anything that uses any of the snap functions. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And to start with, what we're going to do is we're going to load in a quilt block to work with. So I'm going to come up here to my artwork blocks. That's this icon right here. So these are blocks that have been created in pure artwork. So I'm going to click it, and this opens up a menu of blocks, and you can scroll down with this upper box here to see all the different kinds of blocks. I'm going to be in basic blocks here, and I'm just going to choose this basic block 21 because it's a pretty simple block to work with to show you the concept, and then once you get it down you can apply it to some of the more complex blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. It brings it in, and it's set a color scheme for us here of purple and yellow. And the first thing I'm going to do is right click on this and ungroup the block, and that gives me the ability to work on the various pieces of it here. So these are pieces like they were pieces of fabric. Now, like I said earlier, when we do a faux piecing block, we don't use different pieces of fabric. We use just one piece of fabric for the whole block. So what I'm going to do is set all of these block pieces to a consistent background color. And I could use a solid color, but I can also use an actual fabric swatch. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got everything selected right here. All items is selected. If you clicked off it so it's not, you can just come over here and click all items again in the sequence view. Come up here to the tab, the properties box, and you've got fill checked. It should be checked by default. And I'm going to click on this little fabric icon here, the 3 dots, bring up my fabric library. Now these first fabrics here are ones that I added. You can do that by clicking add fabric and getting a JPEG or PNG or something of the fabric that you want. This is a nice neutral beige fabric, so I'm going to select that and click OK, and that's going to apply it to everything. All right, so you can still see lines in here where it's showing the various pieces, but we're going to work on this center diamond block to begin with. All right, so I'm going to click off of it so that I deselect everything. And then I'm just going to select the middle block here by clicking the inside this first, middle piece of the block by clicking inside it. And it looks like the whole thing is selected, but if you look over here in your sequence view, you can see that all I've got is this inner diamond selected. And so what we're going to do is we're going to apply a texture fill or an advanced stippling fill to this to start our faux piecing process. All right, so I'm going to come down here to my one-click conversion icons. I'm going to first use a texture fill. So I'm going to click on the texture box, and I'm going to click texture 251 here. So let's go ahead and click that, and it's going to bring in a texture. Now you can change the size of it. You can change the pattern. You can change the pattern size here. You can change the stitch length of it if you want. You can even mix patterns. So if I click Mix Patterns and click Apply, you'll see that it alternates. So you can do that if you want. For faux piecing, I don't do that. I just go ahead and leave it all one pattern. So I'm going to uncheck that and click Apply. I think that's a pretty good size for our first block. Now, while we're on the subject of sizing the pattern, one of the things that you need to know is that we're trying to simulate the appearance of fabric. So the way we do that is two ways. If we want a lighter look, we can select a lighter color thread for this, but we can also select a wider or more open pattern or a bigger pattern. So that gives us the illusion of a lighter piece of fabric. So let's go ahead and leave that like that. And this is already set here. So I'm going to click off it, and it came up in yellow. All right, so what I want to do is select that again. I'm going to change it to a darker color. I'm going to change it to this purple, which is already here in our design. And now I've got this purple color for the thread here. And I'm going to turn on 3D by clicking my 3D icon so you can see how that looks. And that's a pretty nice pattern. Now you can see here that it fills the pattern, and sometimes you can see what looks like a stitch along the edge, but these are actually just run stitches to connect one row of the pattern to the next. And you can see that sometimes it doesn't need them depending on where it intersected the pattern. So what I want to do though is I want to make a nice border for it. So the way Total Quilter and My Decorative Quilter defaults is to leave the original artwork behind. So I changed this original artwork here, you can see in the sequence view, to my texture fill. But it left this original diamond behind. Now that's good for us because I want to actually use this to add a run stitch border to this. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and select it, and I'm going to do another conversion. I'm going to come over here to my run stitch and click that, and that's going to add a run stitch. Now again, it added it in yellow, so I'm going to select it and change it to purple, and so now it's the same color as my outline, or as my pattern. All right, so now I've got a nice consistent border going around it to delineate the edge of the block, or the piece rather, and I'm pretty happy with that, so we're going to go ahead and keep that. Now I used a run stitch. Now if you want to use a decorative stitch, or you want to use a triple run or a double run or whatever you want to get a thicker look, you can. You can do whatever you want with that stitch. You don't even have to use it if you don't want. Now if you happen to have Total Quilter integrated into FTCU like I actually do here, having this artwork stay behind is actually an option you can turn on and off, because FTCU did not work this way. It did not leave the original artwork behind, and some people don't like it when it leaves that behind. So what would we do if it didn't? Let's go ahead and delete the original artwork. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Now if you don't have it like this, if your original artwork was there, you can ignore this part of it, but I'm just going to show you. I'm going to collapse this here because I don't need it. And I'm going to delete my run stitch. So we're going to pretend that it wasn't there. And we converted that original diamond artwork into a set of texture fill for that. All right, so by deleting that artwork, you can see that it actually deleted my background. So I'm going to actually do an undo and an undo and put that back. All right, so I'm just going to delete the run stitch. So let's just pretend that I didn't have this other artwork here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this texture fill and I'm simply going to copy and paste it. So I'm going to come up here to my copy icon, click it. I'm going to click my paste icon. It's going to put another copy of the texture fill here, which I really don't want. I don't want it to stitch over itself like that. So what I'm going to do is just have, with this extra one selected, just convert that into a run, and I get the same effect. All right, so that's how you would do it if you didn't have that copy. But if you don't have that original artwork, then it's going to be hard to do this fill thing. So you might want to turn that option back on, and you can find that in your preferences. Now I'm in Total Quilter demo mode here, so I don't know if I'm going to see that in here or not, but let's actually see. Let me go to my environment. It's not there. Let me go to view. It's not there. Okay, so it's not here in the Total Quilter only because I don't have it running in FTCU mode right now, but you'll find it in your preferences. There'll be a checkbox for leave the original artwork behind. All right, so, oh, actually, you know, I think I remember where it might be. Hold on a second. It's here in the Total Quilter. Yeah, so it's here in the Total Quilter tab, and it's keep artwork segments in embroidery conversion. So if before starting this exercise you recheck this, then you won't have to go through that copy paste sequence. All right, so enough about that. We've got that one done. Now let's do our outside triangles here. We're going to make them all the same. All right, now you could just leave it like this. All right, because there'd be another block here, and theoretically that would be a different block, so this would look just like a different piece of fabric. But let's go ahead and put a different pattern in our triangles in the corner. So I'm going to select that. Now this selects all of them. If I expand this by pressing that little plus there, I see that I've got all these artwork triangles. So I'm just going to select them all at once because I'm going to put the same pattern in all of them. This time we're going to use an advanced stippling fill. So I'm going to come down here to my advanced stippling, click it, and it's going to bring up this dialog. And I want a much tighter pattern than I have here because I want to simulate a darker fabric out here. So what I'm going to do is select stipple 15, and that's going to come in. That came in pretty tight compared to this one, but I'm going to make it even tighter. I'm going to change my pattern size down to, let's make it an 8mm pattern size, and click apply. All right, and I said I wanted to make this a darker piece of fabric, but let's actually make it look a little bit lighter by simply changing the thread color to white. All right, so let's come in here and do a search for white, and I happen to know that it is color number 800, but it should find it for me here. No, that's Angora white. I don't see it right away. Okay, let's type in 800. So I know that's Floriani white. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to click that, and we're going to add that color to our design. When I click off it, there you can see that I've got that white color on that thread. Now if I wanted to simulate a much darker piece of fabric, I could select those stitches, which are right here in white, and I could say change them to a, well, I don't know, let's change them to a dark brown. Let's see, here's a darker brown. Okay, so let's try that. Or here's a real dark brown. Let's do that one. And click off it. Oh, actually it came out green. It just looks a little brown on my monitor. But anyway, that looks pretty good. Okay, so you can see how we've got this illusion here of two different types of fabric by just putting some stitches on top and by changing this pattern. So it's pretty easy to do. You can start to do more complicated blocks now that you have the technique down, and you can see how easy it is to create a quilt block and then eventually the total quilt. You can stitch these blocks out on your embroidery machine very, very quickly, and get your quilt put together with just piecing the quilt blocks together and not having to do any of the cutting or internal piecing here. So that's faux piecing. I hope you like the technique. So that's our lesson for March 2021. I want to thank you all for watching and invite you to come back next month for our next edition of Total Quilter Monthly.